What's up YouTube, welcome back to another video on my channel Skotrix, and today as you can see we are back on NBA 2K21 Next Gen, and in today's video I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be in the W mode, which is basically like the My Career mode of the WNBA, and I'm going to be ranking every single build in this mode on a scale of 1 to 10. I'm not going to be ranking it on this chart like I usually do. Instead I'm going to rank these on a scale of 1 to 10 and give a brief description of why I'm ranking that build, where I'm ranking that build. But before I get into that, I just want to mention really quickly, if y'all haven't subbed to my channel yet, make sure you click that subscribe button. Only about 2% of people who watch my videos are actually subbed to my channel, so if you click that sub button right now, you can join the 2% gang. I really appreciate it. It helps it a lot. But with all that being said, without any further ado, let's get right into the video here. Alright, so before we get started right here, I just want to mention really quickly, I'm not going to be going too in depth on why I'm ranking each build with what I'm ranking it as. I will give a quick brief description as to why, but I'm not going to go too into detail because this video will end up being like an hour or 2 hours long because there is a ton of builds. But if you guys do want more videos where I go more into depth on each build individually, just comment down below and I can maybe go position by position, breaking down every single build in each position, talking about which ones are the best, why, going into which height, which weight, which everything like that is the best. But for this video, like I said, for the sake of not making it an hour or 2 hours long, I'm just going to be going quickly through each build, giving the rating on a scale of 1 to 10, and then also giving a very brief description of why I'm giving it that rating. So yeah, first off, we're going to be going through the point guards right here. So you just put your position as point guard. None of these other things matter, then just go ahead and say yes. Now, first off, the first build right here is the slashing playmaker. I'm giving this build a 7 out of 10 on the rating scale. It is a good build, good finishing, good playmaking, good physicals, decent defense and shooting as well. It's a pretty good build, above average, but not amazing. Next up, we have the inside out playmaker. This is a slightly better version of the slashing playmaker. Way better shooting, which is really good. Slightly less defense, which is annoying, but I mean, it's not the end of the world. Still slightly better build. I give this an 8 out of 10 because it is a really good all-around build, as you can see right there. Next up, we have the two-way slasher. This build also gets a 7 out of 10. Not quite as good as the last build, but it is a two-way, which is nice. And it does have really good everything, including physicals, except for kind of the shooting. The shooting is only okay. So the two-way slasher, pretty good right there, 7 out of 10. Next up, we have the 3-and-D point. This is a super good build, 8 out of 10. Good shooting, good defense, those are probably the two most important things, especially when your build can also play make and finish, as well as having a base speed of 90. This is a super good build, 8 out of 10 right there. Next up, we have the 3-level score. This is a 7 out of 10. Now I know it seems like I'm just going back and forth between 7 and 8. Don't worry, that's just how these first few builds are. I'm going to be going way more in a less condensed range. That's just how these first builds are, but this is a 7 out of 10 right here. Super good shooting, basically the best shooting build you can make in the entire game, and it also has the ability to finish at the rim and decent playmaking, as well as pretty decent defense. So 7 out of 10, pretty solid build right here. Then you have the offensive threat. This build just isn't as good as a couple of the other builds, and it's not as good as the play shot that's coming up either. Plus the defense is absolutely terrible, so I give this build a 4 out of 10. Next up, we have the sharpshooter. Again, a super good shooting build, even better than the 3-level score, but there's really no point in making this over the 3-level score because the 3-level score has so much better in all of the other attribute categories, and the shooting is basically just as good anyways, so this one receives a 4 out of 10. Next up, we have the play shot. This is probably the best build in the entire game. This one gets a 9 out of 10 because it has super good finishing, basically a slasher type of finishing, super good shooting, super good playmaking, and also really good defense and physicals, so 9 out of 10 right there. Next up, we have the lockdown. This build gets a 3 out of 10. Really don't see the purpose for this build. It can't shoot, it doesn't have a ton of finishing, it doesn't have a ton of playmaking. Obviously it's good at defense, but I mean it's really only good at guard defense. It's not even a build that can really guard all positions, and the physicals are only okay, so this is not the best build. 3 out of 10 right there. And then for the last build, we have the two-way playmaker. This is a pretty good all-around build, not super good, not super bad. This is a 5 out of 10 right here, but if it had a little bit better shooting, it would easily be way higher. So that's all the guard builds right there. Those are the 10 guard builds, all ranked. Now we're going to back out of here and go into the shooting guards. Now the shooting guards, I'm not going to go into each specific build. Basically, it's the exact same as the point guards for the shooting guards. There really is no difference. A lot of the attributes are slightly lower on shooting guards. So if you have a 93 and something for a point guard, it'll probably be about like a 90, 91, 92 for a shooting guard. But obviously you have the advantage of having more height. So if you're not going to be dribbling the ball a ton, because obviously only one player on the court can have the ball at every time. So that means that there's 9 players that don't have the ball. Then it might be better off to be a shooting guard for the extra height, extra physicals, all that stuff. Well, not extra physicals. What I mean by that is extra height, wingspan, and weight. Then you may be better off as a shooting guard, but overall I think the point guard builds are slightly better than the shooting guards, so I'm not going to go over the shooting guards because they are just very slightly worse versions of the point guard builds. So we're just going to leave that right there, go straight to the small forwards right here. Go ahead, say yes to continue. Now, first off, for the small forwards, we're going to be starting off with the Paint Beast right here, and I give this a 4 out of 10. It's not as good as the power forward version of the Paint Beast, which we're going to be getting to. And even the power forward version of the Paint Beast is not super good, but it does have really good all-around stats. As you can see, it's not amazing at anything. It does have a pretty good driving layup, but it's not amazing at everything. Everything else is pretty much in like the 70s or like maybe get up to 80. So really not a great build. Just a 4 to 10 right there. Then next up we have the two-way point forward. This is not as good as some of the versions of the build that we're going to be coming up to in the next few things. There's a few different point forward type of builds here. This is probably the worst one. This one gets a 4 to 10 as well. Next up we have the slashing point forward. Slightly better than the two-way point forward. This one gets a 5 out of 10. Obviously it doesn't have as much defense, but it beats out the point forward here at everything else basically, and it gets the mid-range up quite a bit, so that's good too, so you can actually shoot some mid-ranges. But even the three-pointer right here is still not amazing, so that's why it only gets a 5 out of 10. Then next up we have the inside out point forward, and this build is actually pretty good. This build gets a 7 out of 10. This is one of the best small forward builds in the entire game. Too bad it doesn't have higher defense, because that's kind of the only thing that holds it back from being an 8, 9, or a 10. But it is still really good, especially at offense. Then next up right here we have the two-way slasher. This is a good build as well, pretty good all around except for the shooting again. But because it has such high attributes and basically everything else, I'm giving this one a 7 out of 10 as well. Then we have the 3&D wing. This is a super good build, even though some of the attributes are not as high as some other builds. This is a super practical build that you would really want to have. Basically 3&D wings are super good in every 2K in history basically, and even in the NBA super valuable. So this one gets an 8 out of 10. Really good build right there. Next up we have the 3-level scorer. This is an okay build, but you're basically trading off the defense from the 3&D wing for some extra finishing, and I don't think it's worth it. It is still good, but it's just not quite as good as the 3&D wing, so this one gets a 6 out of 10. Next up we have the offensive threat. This is one of the worst builds in the game. I mean, you do have some offense, but it's not even as good as these builds, not even close, and the defense is absolutely terrible, so this one gets a 2 out of 10. One of the worst builds you can make. Do not make a small forward offensive threat, that's for sure. Then we have the sharpshooter right here. I'm going to give this a 5 out of 10. Not a ton of defense right here. Obviously it's really good at shooting, but everything else is kind of average, so unless you really need that extra shooting, I would not recommend this build, though the extra shooting does help a lot of players, so that's why it gets a 5 out of 10 instead of a 3 or a 4. A lot of players do want a very good shooter, and this build is a very good shooter. Basically the best shooting wing you can make. And next up we have the playmaking shot creator right here at small forward. I don't recommend making this. If you want to make a play shot, make it at point guard. This one is nowhere near as good. This is a 6 out of 10. And last off right here we have the lockdown defender. This is a 3 out of 10. Don't make this build. It's not even really a super good all-around defender. There's better power forwards that you can make for all-around defense, and it basically can't do anything on offense, so don't make this build. Really not that good. 3 out of 10. Obviously the only reason it doesn't get a 1 or a 2 is because it is pretty good at defense, but it's not as good as some other builds, so really no point in making that. And that's it for the small forwards right there. Now we're on to the power forwards. Let's get going right here. First off, we're onto the Paint Beast, and I know this video is moving super quick, but like I said, if you guys do want a more in-depth video, just comment down below, let me know, and I'll go position by position and go way more in depth for every single build. But for this video, I'm just gonna be flying through it right here. So this Paint Beast gets a 4 out of 10. Obviously the best thing about this is it's really good all around. Same thing with the small forward. It is slightly better than the small forward, but I'm giving it a 4 out of 10 as well, because there's so many better options at power forward, as you're going to see as we go through these next few right here. So this one gets a 4 out of 10, decent but not that good. Next up we have the two-way point forward, which is a better version of the Paint Beast in my opinion, and this one gets a 7 out of 10. This is a pretty good build. Obviously really good dribbling, really good defense actually, and pretty good finishing as well. If it had higher finishing, this could easily get an 8 or a 9, but it doesn't, so I mean 7 is basically the highest I can give this, and the physicals are also really good, so that's good. And next up right here we have the slashing point forward, basically a slightly worse version of the two-way point forward, so this one gets a 6 out of 10. Then we have the inside out point forward. This build really isn't that good. The defense is so bad. You do get some shooting, which is nice, some finishing, but the defense is just so bad, and the offense barely even is better than some of the other two-way builds. So this one only gets a 3 out of 10, really not the best build that you could be making. Next up we have the two-way slashing forward. This is a really good build. This one gets a 7 out of 10, and it could even be an 8 out of 10, but it doesn't have very much shooting at all, so it's only 7 out of 10 for this build. It does have good defense, good playmaking, and good finishing. Basically a better version of the Paint Beast in my opinion, so 7 out of 10 for that one. Next up we have the 3-level scorer. This is an okay build, basically the second best stretch forward that you can make, but the difference between this and the next build that we're going to go over is this does have some finishing as well, but the terrible defense, terrible playmaking, and kinda average physicals make this only a 4 out of 10. Next up we have the sharpshooter, basically the best stretch forward that you can make, and this one gets a 6 out of 10. The reason I can't put it any higher is because the defense is so terrible. 6 out of 10 right there. Next up we have the play shot. Don't make this. 3 out of 10. I don't know why you'd make a play shot power forward. Really not worth it. Don't make this. 3 out of 10 right there. Next up we have the post scorer. This is a 5 out of 10. This is not as good as the center post scorer. That's the only reason it can't go any higher. Even though it's not a terrible build, you're so much better off making the center version of the post scorer. So this is a 5 out of 10. And then the lockdown defender is a 2 out of 10. This is really a pretty bad build. I mean, it can guard every single position, but so can a build like the 2-way slashing 4. And this one has such better offense compared to the lockdown defender, which has absolutely no offense. I really don't see the point in making this build when there are so many other 2-way builds that have good offense and way better physicals as well. So that's the reason this only gets a 2 out of 10. Now we're going on to the centers right here. There's only 6 different center builds, so this will go quick. And the first one is going to be the Paint Beast again. This one gets a 6 out of 10. This is a pretty solid build. It's basically a combination of the post scorer and the defensive anchor build that we're going to be going over in a second here. So it's a pretty decent build. Obviously really good defense, pretty good finishing as well. Too bad it doesn't have more playmaking or shooting. That's the only reason I can't put it any higher. But it is a center. It is a Paint Beast, so you can't expect too much from these builds. Obviously they have a huge height advantage as well that you have to take into consideration. So this is a 6 out of 10 right here. Next up we have the 2-way slashing 5. This is an okay build, 4 out of 10. Again, not much shooting on this build. That's the reason I can't put it any higher. The defense is also worse than the Paint Beast, so it is a slightly worse build. That's why this one only gets a 4 out of 10. Next up we have the 3-level scorer. This is kind of like a stretch 5 with some finishing, but barely any finishing, and it's not as good as shooting as the next build that we're going to be going over. So this one only gets a 3 out of 10. Next up we have the sharpshooter. This is actually a pretty good build. It has pretty good shooting for such a tall build, and also the defense is somewhat respectable, I guess. The block and the defensive rebound is at least usable, so this is an okay build. Decent if you're looking for a oversized stretch that might throw some people off. Really good right there, 7 out of 10. That's what I'm giving the sharpshooter right here. Next up we have the post scorer. This build can actually get pretty tall. It can get up to 6'10", so I'm giving this build an 8 out of 10. Just because obviously if you make this build and you make it max height, you will have a huge height advantage over every other female my player. And the mid-range on this build is really what makes it good as well. An 84 mid-range is super doable. Obviously that'll go down a bit if you upgrade the height, but still, having a mid-range on a build like this is super important. And last off right here, we have the defensive anchor. This gets a 5 out of 10. I mean, I think you're probably better off making a post scorer than a defensive anchor, just because the post scorer does have so much offense to go along with the almost as good defense. But if you're looking for just an inside build where you can just sit in the paint and just control the paint, this is a super good build for you, but it's not a super good build overall. It's only a 5 out of 10. And that's actually the final build right here for the WNBA, the W mode. And that's going to be it for the video as well. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you like, subscribe to my channel if you're new. Like I said, only 2% of people who watch my videos are actually subbed to my channel. So if you click that sub button right now, you can join the 2% gang. Really appreciate it. Helps out a lot. And also, if you guys do want me to go more in depth with all of these builds, show off which heights are the best, all of that, which weight, which wingspan, and how to make each build specifically, I could make a few videos doing that by position, or maybe I'll make one video for guards, one video for wings, and one video for centers. It's really up to you guys what you want me to do. Just comment down below and let me know. But yeah, last thing I want to mention is my live streaming YouTube and my Twitch will be down in the description below. Make sure you guys go follow me over there as well. I really appreciate it. But yeah, that's gonna be it. Peace.